We live in a world that has a population of over 7 billion people. Out of this 7 billion, 2 billion are estimated to be Christians. 2 billion are estimated to be Muslims. 1 billion Hindus and 1 billion Buddhists. That's 6 billion of the population right there. As many would undoubtedly realize, living in this world, either people are predominantly Christian or they're predominantly Muslim. If you're in America and most European areas, although they're getting flooded anymore, Christianity is something with over 2 billion adherents that we've all had to deal with, I'm sure. They wish to talk to us about the providence of the universe and justify their belief in Christianity due to unsolved mysteries. But mostly what they give is nothing more than anecdotal evidence. Maybe a God does exist. Maybe it does. Maybe there was something that created the universe. But how does that automatically qualify Christianity as the true religion? Yahweh as that God. Well, for instance, how do we know he's not Allah? How do we know he's not Ganesh or Thor or Odin? Many other thousands upon thousands of gods. Why is it Yahweh? So when they speak about the nature of reality, they don't even deserve to talk about that. They don't deserve to be able to connect what may or may not be true to Yahweh. It doesn't work like that. Well, let's explain the religion. The religion supposedly was created 6,000 years ago by Abraham, a schizophrenic Jew. So let's spell it out. Nobody had Judaism at that point. And one day, Abraham hears voices in his head. Well, 6,000 years ago, they didn't know about schizophrenia. So today, if that were to happen, we would know that this person was just insane. Well, what's the first thing that God asks of Abraham? Go sacrifice your kid. Well, now we know he's insane, because that's usually what happens with schizophrenia people, right? Well, I want you to go kill people, says the voices in my head. So that's a very nice start to a religion. Well, somehow he doesn't sacrifice his kid because God told him not to, but let's be real, anything could have been the true reason, maybe because his wife or other people were upset or what have you. Well, a kid is actually the name for a child goat. So I don't know if he somehow connected the dots that, oh, when you said kid, you didn't mean my son, you must have meant goats. So let's start sacrificing goats, cutting their heads off and sticking their heads on altars, which, funny enough, is what they claim Satanists to be and do. Somehow he convinced the tribal Israelites to do this, that the voices in his head were true, which, by the way, this is where God told him about Adam and Eve, the beginning of the universe and all that, and they wrote it down. And then when he died, nobody else could hear the voices in their head, so they wrote it into books and they continued on with it, in sacrificing goats to please the sky god, so that way they could go to some kind of everlasting, blissful life after they died. Quite fascinating. And then after 4,000 years of this, now mind you, before this 6,000 years, fundamentalist Christians believe that the world is 10,000 years old. Well, we know that that's not the case, but even if it were 10,000 years, we can easily say that the 4,000 years before Abraham, everybody died and went to hell. For the 4,000 years after Abraham, everyone who wasn't a Jew went and died and went to hell to burn for all eternity. Then suddenly, Jesus comes on the scene, and we have a filthy human sacrifice. So now we went from goat sacrifice to human sacrifice. It's really funny because I had a woman tell me one time that she was raised pagan and her mother sacrificed a goat on an altar and really scared her, and now she's a Baptist Christian. And I had to remind her that her entire religion was about sacrificing goats in much the same fashion, and then having a brutal human sacrifice that took place in precedence over all these other sacrificial goats. And that is the premise of their entire religion. The Wicker Man movie is essentially their religion. So it's really interesting when they want to blame Christians for what is really their religion. They just don't think about it. And then what's even worse is that they want to cannibalize him. You know, eat my body, drink my blood, and all this other disgusting instances of Christianity. It really doesn't make any sense. And now from this point forward, anyone who believes in the human sacrifice can now go to heaven. And no longer has to sacrifice goats. And that is the premise of the entire religion. It has nothing to do with maybe God exists, maybe he doesn't. No. We know his name, we know what he wants because some schizophrenic Jew 6,000 years ago told us so. We sacrificed goats for 4,000 years, but then we got a human sacrifice, and now we can go to heaven from there. But anyone who does not believe in this human sacrifice, no matter how good they are, no matter how great of deeds, they spend their life in charity and helping others, they get to burn in hell for all eternity. Whereas the psychopathic killer who murdered 300 children and raped them to death accepts Jesus on his deathbed, he goes to heaven. Now, this is the most obscene, perverse, and ridiculous myth I have ever heard of in my life. But it gets better. None of these sequences even happened. It's obvious because they were stolen from pagan allegories. We can go back to Horus of 5,000 years ago. Born of a virgin on December 25th. Had 12 disciples. At the age of 33, he was crucified, dead for 3 days, only to be resurrected. Mithra of Persia. The list goes on and on. We can easily name at least 18 pagan gods with this exact same thing. And it's all having to do with allegories of the sun, which the Son of God, who goes around the 12 signs of the zodiac as his 12 disciples. On December 25th, the three brightest stars in Orion's belt, which are called today what they were called in ancient times, the Three Kings, align with the brightest star, Sirius, and align to the birth of the sunrise. What day do Christians worship their sun god? Sunday. Not Saturn Day, not Moon Day, but Sunday. All the days of the week are days of which planet to worship. And Sunday is the day that you worship the sun god, which is essentially what Jesus is. As the sun goes into the southern hemisphere, it appears to be going down in the sky until it reaches its lowest point for December 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, where it resides on the southern crux or cross. On December 25th, it moves 1 degree, this time north, and it ascends back into heaven, where it can be seen coming in the clouds with its crown of thorns or sun rays. This is all sun worship. This is all pagan myths that well predated Christianity by thousands of years. This was the exact stories of 18 or more pagan gods. And I can go further into it. Every single bit of the story is stolen from pagan gods. How do you explain that? You don't. Nobody can explain that. They try to wish it away, and then if you bring it up hard enough for them to realize, then they go into complete defensive mode, and they don't want to answer that because they know it's false. The ones who know the story. The ones who don't know the story are your typical Christian. When they know that, then most of them don't adhere to Christianity anymore because they realize it's false. It is a lie. Even in principle, as I explained, your goat sacrificing and human sacrificing, or everybody else burns in hell, makes no sense. But now when we dissect it even further and realize it's stolen from pagan allegories, it really makes no sense. It's obviously a lie. There's no way around it. And the only thing it caused was 1,000 years of the Dark Ages, witch hunt trials, crusades where they murdered everyone, burnt their cities to the ground, the Inquisition, where they tortured even Christians. If you were just suspected of being a witch, if somebody put it in the box, a slip that said that, you were tortured to death, burned alive, what have you. And this is the type of world that these Christians want to bring about. A theocracy. A Christian-dominated country. Well, this is what would happen. It would be illegal. Let me explain something. Homosexuality has been outlawed for quite some time. It's only recent that it was okay. Did you know that in 1954, a man in Britain was accused of homosexuality? He had two choices. Either 2 years in prison, where he knew he'd be raped and murdered, or he had to subject himself to shots that would chemically castrate him and make him grow boobs. Well, he chose the third option of injecting cyanide in an apple with a syringe and eating it and killing himself. That was in the 50s. We have not gone that far from the Dark Ages, folks. Only because of fighting this tyranny have we got to where we've gotten. And lastly, I want to sum it up with, did you know that the Bible itself pretty much defeats itself? Besides the thousands of contradictions, which are very important, that you can't even decide what is true within it, there's two main points. One is that Jesus told his disciples, "Surely I tell you, in your lifetime, before you pass away, before you die, in your lifetime, you will be sitting on a throne, I will have returned, and we will rule this world." That was supposedly 2,000 years ago, so Jesus defeated himself with his own prophecy. It didn't come true. It didn't happen. He lied. It's done. Well, we want to ignore that, though. Well, what's another thing that we like to ignore? If we're going to take the Bible literally, let's take it literally. Another thing that we like to ignore, and a lot of people know this one, is that only 144,000 are going to heaven. Oh yeah, that's true, that's in the Bible, but you know, that just doesn't make any sense. We gotta all be going, whoa, wait a minute. You want to take it literally. Well, take it literally. Well, let's read what those 144,000 have to even do. First, they have to be of Jewish ethnicity, so you're out. They have to be male, so all females are gone. They have to be of virgins, and I believe they have to castrate themselves. There's all sorts of things, and this is from all, let's just say, the last 6,000 years. So the most pious Jews before would be more counted than today's Jews. So God may only be waiting on 50 or less Jews in the world of 7 billion today to go to heaven. Everybody else will go to hell, where after 100 trillion years of screaming to death in the most horrific pain, you haven't even begun your sentence. It's for all eternity. It just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and you just burn and scream and choke and cry for all eternity because you didn't believe that a man that heard voices was told to go murder goats and then have a human sacrifice where apparently even if we did believe in it, it didn't matter because only 144,000 would be saved. But regardless, even if most Christians would supposedly be saved, all the genuine nice people in the world would still burn for all eternity. And how are you going to go to heaven while everybody is screaming and choking to death? I mean, put them out of their misery at least. At least put them out of their misery. Make them suffer for, I don't know, a year or whatever, and then they just burn up and they die. Which people could say, oh, well, I'm sure that's what happens because God wouldn't be that mean. No. You can't say, I'm sure what would happen. You're a Christian. You take your holy book, the Bible, as truth. And it says they will burn for all eternity. But you need to stop taking what you think is truth and reality and putting it over the Bible. You have to take the Bible literally to be a Christian. You can't take it literally half the time and unliterally the other half of the time. They're going to burn for all eternity, supposedly, because they didn't sacrifice enough goats or something. So, in conclusion, one can see that there might be a God. There might be life after death. There might be spirituality. There might be these things. But one thing that I think that we can all be certain upon is that the Christian lie is not the truth.